Many children in South Africa, we're told, drop out of school long before they reach their matric, and boys are leaving the system at a much higher rate than girls. Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube says while some girls return to school after leaving, boys tend to never come back. Let's try at least get to the root causes of this with educational psychologist Rivendri Govender, who joins us via our video link. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the SABC News Channel. It's an interesting pattern that was highlighted by the department earlier this week when we, of course, were digesting the matric pass rate from 2025. And I wonder whether there are, I don't know, perhaps more obvious reasons about why it is things are panning out the way they are in our country.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. We're living in a time where systematic inequalities and socioeconomic inequalities and barriers are central to these problems. Things such as poverty, financial household strain remain the key drivers to these high dropout rates that we're seeing. Even in no-fee schools, indirect costs such as transport, uniform, stationery often lead to learners being unable to meet the obligations needed for school. Then other things such as when there's a weak learning foundation, academic difficulties that profoundly impact the learner's ability to engage with the content and leaves the learner feeling disengaged, disempowered, and ultimately results in the learner dropping out from school. Other things such as inadequate basic literacy and numeracy skills further contributes to this feeling of discouragement and disconnection from school. Then you have things such as your teenage pregnancy, gendered barriers, high bullying rates in our schools that also contribute towards, the further dropout rates that we are seeing. Is, constantly changing from school to school, where learners don't have some sort of stability, which further increases the high rates of dropout.
Yeah, you mentioned there this idea of a weak foundation, and I wonder if we can delve a bit deeper into that, because part of what we're also hearing from, I don't know, scholars and academics is that by the time pupils reach school, so I'm talking grade 1 and grade 8, if the foundation isn't there, you've actually kind of already lost the battle, so to speak. And I can't help but wonder if we're placing enough of an emphasis in those early formative years, given even the disruption we're going through now, where, of course, ECD centers are being moved from the Social Development Department under the Education Department.
Absolutely, there can never be enough emphasis placed on early literacy and numeracy skills. And given that there is this move, we need to ensure that the quality of the outputs don't change. We need to ensure that our learners are still being empowered to develop their numeracy and especially their literacy skills in South Africa, so that we are already facing an uphill climb when it comes to literacy in South Africa. We need to ensure that every step and every measure is put in place to ensure that our learners are able to actively keep up with the curriculum as the year progresses.
Yeah. South Africa already spends so much of its GDP on education, amongst the highest on the continent and sometimes even the world. And whenever we pose those kind of questions to government officials, we're told that, the issues we are seeing in our schools and the outcomes thereof cannot be restricted just to the schooling environment. In many instances, schools perform as best as the community allows them to.
Absolutely, you are 100% right in saying that the responsibility is not that of the school on its own. The responsibility lies with the parent. It lies with the individual learner themselves. It lies with the community for greater support. Starting out reading programs on a Saturday morning, using religious organizations to empower our learners to engage in leisurely reading, to develop reading centers in our community where there's limited access to resources, so that we can have communal reading to ensure that learners are constantly engaging with literacy, and not just literacy from a leisurely perspective, but also engaging in literacy in terms of topical events, so that they engage with reading in a more critical manner as well.
Yeah. A lot was made of the uptake or lack thereof of these so-called gateway subjects by matriculants. The Education Minister concerned that not many people are taking up the maths core, the accounting, the physics, and the likes. And the debate for me has been quite interesting, Rivendri, because do you force people to take up subjects that you know they're unlikely to do well in because of the potential benefits down the line? Or should we focus on what people are actually good at and allow them to excel on that score?
It's such a catch-22 because yes, there are benefits down the line, but forcing a child to take on a subject like accounting or physical sciences may also result in that learner feeling quite disempowered when they're not able to manage the subject. We need to assess the strengths and the weaknesses of that specific learner and play to those strengths while developing those weaknesses. So using the subjects that are less intensive to assist the learner in developing skills and competencies that they will be able to use later on in their life when they engage in a professional career. Going on to maths core, it is of utmost importance that an individual, engage in some sort of mathematical-based subject, whether it be maths core or math literacy. Hopefully, the learner is able to engage in maths core, but at the end of the day, we also have to be realistic. There are individuals and learners who are not able to engage, to cope with the demands of maths core, and therefore we need to allow these learners to learn at a pace that is more acceptable for them.
The matric results, of course, are only but one of the matrices we could use to kind of gauge how the system is doing. And in most instances, it's more qualitative. We speak about how many passes there are, the rate thereof, how many people make it into universities, etc. But I wonder if there's if there's enough focus on the qualitative data itself. How good are these passes? And, to what extent are pupils leaving the system in good stead to essentially step into the real world, so to speak?
100%. I think there needs to be a much more focus on the qualitative analysis of these results. How competent are our learners for the real world? Do they have the key skills needed to be able to survive and thrive in the real world? How effective is the curriculum that is being taught in these subjects? And we need to look at that versus the statistics that come out in terms of the matric results and compare the two from a more holistic point of view.
Fair enough. Thanks very much indeed for giving us your insights. Plenty to think about as we continue, of course, gauging how well our education system is doing. Rivendri Govender is an educational psychologist. Once again, thanks very much indeed for your time.